key thing I wanted to say is that I have worked across the supply chain. So I've worked as a client, a consultant, manufacturer, and even an independent within this space. So I do have quite a good empathy for what you're going through as FM and the connected space. And I'm really passionate, having worked throughout the supply chain, getting best value and making these things work hard for clients. There's nothing I hate to see more than a client that's getting poor value via a poor contract, or the technology that's not really working hard for them, or seeing them spend the money 3 times when they could have got one component that works hard for it. I'm employed by Tridium, so I'm going to give you 2 really quick slides. If you don't know us already, I'm not going to go through all those points, but we're a global company. We turn over about $120 million a year. We're part of Honeywell, we're a $30 billion company that you probably know. So we're big, and we're quite good at this stuff, but we are an independent company because many of our clients, so although Honeywell own the shares, we operate arm's length because people like Siemens, Schneider, Cylon all use our software within their products. So we operate as an independent company. But what we specialize in is open systems that connect things. So it could be existing BMSs, it could be the BMS, or it could be IoT devices and things like that. So don't worry, it's not a Tridium presentation, but just to give you a feel for what we're about. So Niagara is the software that we use, and this is, so there's not too many words on this slide. Someone was commenting there should be more pictures and less words earlier, so hopefully that's visual enough. But down the left there, you can see the typical systems that you might have installed in your estate, so BMS, lighting, energy, signage, you can read. Historically, each of those will come with their own proprietary protocol. Probably it was closed, you had the choice of one, none of these things would integrate, so you just ended up with silos of information and independent systems that didn't work together in a coordinated way, and you really couldn't leverage that data. What Niagara does is it has a very powerful library of drivers and interfaces that can interface with about 200 systems. So I'm not saying we can interface with every BMS and system in the world, but most PLCs, BMSs, SCADA, lighting, fire security, we can connect those together maybe 80-90%. So what we'll do is we'll take all those different languages and protocols that you'll have on your separate systems across your estate, normalize that data into one common language, and then we can run analytics on that data. We can serve it to enterprise level, whatever systems you might be using here, might be CAFM systems, etc. But until we get all that data in one common language, it's not of great value to you. So that slide so this is really what we're doing as a company, but I think that's the last corporate slide. So Connected FM, the title I've been given to present to you today. I wanted to do a brief market overview of the FM market based on how I see it. Then look at, do we think it's time for disruption in that marketplace? I know it's a tick in the box if you use the word disruption in a presentation, so apologise. And definitely holistic's not in here anywhere. We're then going to talk briefly about big data and the IoT and connected buildings. So as far as where the FM market is at the moment, in one slide, this is my take on the UK FM market. So in 2016, it was a 9 billion business, so it's a significant business just in the UK. Globally, it's just under $1 billion industry that we're talking about. It's based on astrology. The way that most contracts are managed is the way I like to present it, which is really we maintain assets based on the rotation of the Earth around the sun, and that's it. And I think if I came to you saying I've got this astrological FM platform, do you want to use it? You think I'm mad. But that is exactly how most PPM systems work, when they just say, based on time, the month, the year, we're going to maintain that asset. So why it makes sound engineering sense to maintain assets based on the position of the sun and the moon, I don't understand. It's a low margin, micro margin. Looking at some of the leading FM companies, they're making between 2 and 5% gross margin on a £9 billion business. So it's high volume, low margin business. It's wafer thin margins. Contracts that we see sometimes do not encourage innovation. They don't encourage partnerships. Revenues are being done with reactive calls and multiple visits and things. So as an industry, we need to look at, okay, we might accept that looking at the position of planets is not the best way of maintaining assets, but we also need to look at the contracts that we're procuring these services by, because I see many, many contracts from both sides of the fence where the clients are getting very, very poor value just because of the regime that they're asking people to operate in. And then I like the story of the three envelopes, which is a tongue-in-cheek nod to the FM market, which is when you get the new FM contractor comes in and the old FM contractor will pass him three envelopes and he says you need to open one of these at the end of each year. So he does. The end of the first year, the FM contractor opens it up and it says blame the last contractor. At the end of the second year, he opens up the contract envelope and it says do a reorganisation, and at the end of the third year he opens up and it says write out three envelopes. So it's a very, but this is like the revolving door of the FM market that we see, whether it's 3, 4, 5 years, and we're just chasing the price to the ground. So I really, as I say, I'm passionate that this is not really the way for FM companies to deliver services and make profits, and it's definitely not delivering value to their clients. I've stolen this from Verisi, so I don't know if there's anybody from Verisi in the room. If there is, thank you for the slide. But this is really just talking about the challenges globally in the FM market as far as people training. Everyone's going doing degrees. We know that the trades that we all use in our organisations. But you can see here, this is for the US, but the UK follows a very similar model. But by 2022, there are 115,000 engineers short in the US. And I know that in the UK, we have a similar issue with people not going into less sexy trades of being electricians, plumbers, etc., the trades that our industry relies on. So not only do we need to use technology to come up with more intelligent ways of controlling our businesses and more intelligent ways of maintaining the assets that need maintaining, but we're not going to have a choice because we're going to be, hundreds of thousands of people down, and there just won't be the guys there that we need. If you look at the average age of the people in our industry, I've got 30 years experience, so you can do the maths, we're not getting any younger. So this is another massive driver why we need to be looking at how we can make technology work harder. See, more visuals for you. How we maintain assets at the moment is really like driving your car with a rear view mirror. We'll look at how much energy did we use. Is there a reactive call out? It's all based on historical events. If you tried to drive your car going down the road just by looking in the rear view mirror to see what you hit or what you missed and correcting the steering wheel from left to right, you're not going to get very far. But again, this is how today most FM organisations are maintaining those assets. And if we can then use technology to use predictive and cognitive algorithms and make the systems that you've already invested in work harder for you, so you can predict failure and predict where you need to go and send your resources to the areas that have the greatest need, then it's like driving the car looking out of the windscreen rather than via the rearview mirror. I know it's a simple analogy, but I think it does sum up how the industry is at the moment. So I would argue that a business that's just in the UK is a 9 billion turnover business is not very intelligent in how it manages its assets, has an impending skill shortage, is one of these businesses that's ripe for disruption. We've seen more incumbent business, people like Kodak and Blockbuster, who just thought the world was going to carry on going on holiday, bring my roll of film or rent a video. And then we see the disruptors, people like Uber, Airbnb, Amazon. I cannot believe that this industry has not been disrupted already, but with the technology that's available to us now, whether we're using Verisi or Maximo or any of the other CAFM platforms, and the integrated BMSs and other systems that you have within your facilities, you can drive millions out of the cost of delivering this, and somebody will do it. I mean, we are talking to some of the leading FMs across Europe at the moment. We've got pilot projects. They're delivering some fantastic results, which I'll share with you shortly. But disruption is a real game changer, and I would argue that we're there now. So some of the key disruptors, people like Elon Musk, is when we're looking for new ways to deliver services, and we really are looking for the Elon Musk of the FM world to come along and deliver. And if I knew who he was, I would definitely be buying shares in that company now, because I just cannot believe it hasn't happened already. So I would argue that it's not efficient business. Hopefully you have some sympathy for how I presented the industry earlier. And I would also argue that it's time for disruption. Now, the early movers, the people that embrace these technologies, will survive. The people that do not embrace it and just think they're going to carry on doing for the next 10 years what they did for the last 20 years, I would be surprised if half of those businesses are still here within 10 years' time. So then we move on to the Internet of Things, which again is almost mandatory to put in every presentation today, I think. Again, I've stolen this from someone else. There's a theme developing here. I prefer the term Internet of Value. I've seen lots of projects where we've seen people putting sensors on chairs and under tables and by urinals or whatever, but not because they can, or a temperature sensor in this room. But I would always say, what's the value in these things? So why are you doing these things? So we should apply the 3 whys or the 5 whys before we go rushing off doing into IoT deployments. So always think, in my opinion, I'll embrace what the IoT and what it can offer us, but what's in it for me and what's the value? So what's the Internet of Value, as I try to put it? This is fundamentally changing businesses. The whole model that we use with the IoT, from a CapEx model as businesses migrate to different services, and really the servitization and providing software as a service is really where you're seeing the whole IoT going. Most of the IoT providers operate on a SaaS model rather than just a traditional CapEx model, which again the FM industry needs to look at how else we can embrace it, and how, as well as adopting technology, other revenue models will need to be embraced as well. If you get a feel for the size of the players in this market, which I've got on the next slide, it's pretty complicated. So these are stakeholders, FM companies, CAFM companies, software companies, BMS companies. These are all the guys that need to sometime come together to deliver this idea of connected FM. And across your assets and across the estates that you manage, you probably will have many of these. It's impossible for any one provider to come and provide you a solution to integrate all of these things. The only way you can really embrace connected FM and the IoT is through collaboration. So you'll have different stakeholders, be the end client, be it the sensor manufacturer, or any of the other people involved. If we can get a collaborative approach, you get fast innovation, we get development of the products we get, and we get that first mover advantage over your competitors. So you'll see as a theme throughout this presentation on collaboration, but I really see everyone in this room almost as an evangelist of trying to get this kind of community working in a collaborative way to deliver these kind of solutions. It's complicated, yeah? You're not going to do it on your own. So that really is the power of these kind of networking events. The IoT is not here, it's not coming, it's here. So we're already seeing M2M, we're seeing IoT. So in the manufacturing environment, we're seeing PLCs, chillers, all of these devices on the right here are already being connected up. Not only are they giving us real-time data on their condition and things, but this data we could be sending back to the manufacturers so they know, how long do their motors run? Is there an issue with a certain valve or a control regime? So as well as providing value to everyone in this room, I think that we can generate revenue by giving the data from all of these machine learnings that we have from the estates that we manage back to the manufacturers so they can improve either the components or how they set up and operate their devices. This is just an example of a client that has deployed some of the strategies that we're on about. So while they have about 600 retail outlets and gas stores, as they call them in the States, and they had all of the different silos of information. Nothing was integrated. And what they deployed is an integration, and it picked up everything from the BMS and the lighting, which you'd expect, but also the fuel levels in the gas tanks. And then they linked that up with their supplier of fuel, so we had just-in-time inventory management just by linking those things up, and that released millions of dollars of free cash, which prior to that was just buried under the forecourt because they didn't want to run out of gas. They even took it as far as the bread ovens and the food preparation areas, so that when they brought out a new hot dog or a new food that was being reheated in the garage or gas station, they could just download to 600 stores the new strategy, and what took them, maybe 2 weeks of an engineer going around with a laptop was now happening in a couple of clicks of the mouse. So this is real stuff that's happening now. It's delivered, as I say, millions of dollars for this organisation of free cash that they didn't have before, but also long-time operational savings as well. So the next question is, okay, great, I get the IoT, I understand we've got to go for it, everyone's doing it, and we're really looking at how organisations can benefit from the IoT. So Cisco, a company that we'll all recognise, and I see sort of $19-20 trillion as a market figure that's around there. They think that's the potential within the IoT space from a business revenue point of view in the coming years. So it's an enormous value that those that embrace it can capitalise on. But the bad news is only 70% of us have actually got a strategy of how we're going to deploy or embrace these services. So 30% of us are going to be going after that $19 trillion. So we are really, globally, we're not in good shape on this. Everyone gets it, but hardly any organisation has got a strategy of how they're going to deploy this and drive change through their business. But they have to survive. 96% of the companies within this room, and these slides are a year old actually, will be embracing IoT within the next 3 years, whether it be a wireless sensor, an occupancy sensor, a PIR. These devices are already everywhere in even our TVs at home or whatever. So 96% of companies are embracing this technology, and only a third of us have actually got a strategy on how we can harness that, either to drive cost and efficiency in our own business or create revenue opportunities going forward. And it gets sadder, doesn't it? So we better move on from that quickly. So you probably recognise this curve, and it's really the time to market for various innovations from 10% to 90% deployment in the population. So just grabbing two off of there, 60 years from the telephone being invented to 90% of the population having a telephone. With smartphones, it was 7 years. So this speed of deployment and IoT is less than that. So this is a time between 10% to 90%. It's going to be way less than 7 years. And again, this is another reason why you cannot sit down, develop, program, and generate your own IoT integration platform, because by the time you've done it, you'll have missed the boat. So this is another reason why working in an ecosystem of partners and collaborating is the only way you can really embrace the connected buildings. And if you were going to do it, these are the things that you'd actually have to pull together. So you've got cyber security, you've got integration drivers, apps, mobility, analytics, dashboards, all of these things. And you just cannot do that on your own. So you really need to find partners and ecosystems that can deliver all of these things. Cyber security being really, really important. The number of things I've seen where people have deployed IoT sensors, connected it to their site-based IP network, and there's no cybersecurity there at all. So we need to think about, yes, let's embrace this technology, but let's keep our organisation secure. So once we've pulled everything together and we've normalised all the data that you saw on the earlier slide, we then have the big data. So this is another buzzword that I get a tick in the box for. Big data, yeah, it's great, but unless we can crunch and analyse that data, it's of no value to us at all. And in the projects that we've been working on, just with 1FM, we're doing a pilot project on one building. There was 110,000 data points that we mapped over when we did the integration. That's just meaningless noise for them until we run some analytics on it. So we run the analytics and tell them the 10, 20 things that they need to know by cross-referencing data, etc. And then you can make better decisions. So the goal for us in the room and in the industry is to take this data and turn it into information and insight. So, okay, it's a sales pitch, so that's what we do at the edge. This is a feel for what you might have going on within an intelligent building, and I just want to move on and talk to you through some of the case studies of clients that have been through or going through the process that we're talking about. So there's NDAs and things, so I've had 10 minutes, yeah, we're good. So we've got NDAs and things that protect it, so I've debranded it, I'm afraid. but a large UK supermarket. They already had a BMS system, they had a lighting system, they had a meter monitoring system. So you think they're in quite good shape. They had good regimes, their plant rooms were well maintained. We deployed a Niagara across all 3 platforms. We integrated all of these separate silos of data. We then applied analytics. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of analytics is common sense, like if we turn something off, you'd expect to see a reduction in energy, or why is this at 100% when we've hit set point and things like that. So 80% of the wins are almost common sense rather than complicated maths. But in this store, when we run the analytics across what was perceived as a well-maintained store, we found assets that weren't performing. They hadn't raised alarms, but we had a lighting control system that wasn't working. It was on all the time. We had boilers that were short cycling. We had valves that were stuck on open the whole time. And when we ran that through on a good store that we thought was in reasonable shape on KPIs and everything, we found nearly £20,000 worth of savings just on that one store. And this store had a £200,000 a year energy expenditure. So when you scale that across the estate of over 1,000 stores with that retailer, you can see there's enormous savings for them. Okay. This is a feeling for it. So they had a Trend BMS, a Schneider lighting control system, and an Acto meter monitoring. So that was on that store. We then done a pilot project with IBM, where we integrated SCADA, BMS, etc. with one of their clients. Not only did we deliver the energy savings, which typically we're seeing between 10 and 15% when we apply these algorithms to existing sites, but for every £1 in energy savings that IBM were delivering, we also were finding £2 in operational savings. And this was purely because they reduced the amount of nuisance call-outs and reactive labour, etc. So this was the IBM solution. So they were bringing in all of the existing BMS, then supplemented it with IoT data where they had gaps in their knowledge base, put it through IBM Watson, etc. So they're doing it right here, right now. Doing exactly the same thing with Verify and some other leading CAFM providers. So the lessons that we've learned while we've been going through this process is, first of all, look at what systems you have and integrate those. Then bring the data from other sources if you require it. So backfill with IoT devices in the areas that are mission critical to you, but don't just overlay sensors everywhere, because half of these assets have already got intelligent controls that we can integrate with. Cybersecurity is such a big deal, especially as people go piling in doing these IoT projects. They don't even know what's already there in the building. And the management of the data, the strategy for managing this big data is really important. So if there's something that we can process at the edge, so at a site level or plant level, let's do the analysis there. So we can run analytics at the edge, crunch the data at there, and only serve up to the cloud what we need to send to the cloud, because you can get millions and millions of data points. And it's not efficient to be firing that up to the cloud, analysing it, and then firing it back down to the edge again. So we do edge analytics, but also you can serve everything up to enterprise level. But that really was a big lesson learned. And the other lesson is a journey, so you don't get there in one step. It's an evolution, and it takes time. I'm going to skip through this one and just go to the headlines so these are headlines. Some of these are projects that we've delivered, some of these are IBM projects, and some of them are projects that we've done with Verify. So this is just a headlines from some of these. The key thing is that we're seeing ROIs of less than a year in some cases, 90% reduction in alarm touches within the CAFM system, but a 40% reduction in PPMs. So these are real KPIs that have come back from real sites. And if you can imagine driving either 40% out of your PPMs or improving your fixed time in 67%, these are game changers for any company. And these are coming from pilot and initial projects, but they're real data and real projects. So the summary that we have here is the FM business is a high cost, low margin business. It is time for disruption, and it's down to the people in this room to decide whether they're going to embrace that or not. Time is of the essence, so you need to collaborate. We need to work as a team. And I think I'm not underestimating saying that organisations' future survival is based on how they pick this one up. So go back to Einstein. It's all about imagination. We know what we can do with the technology, but we don't necessarily know what your assets are or how your organisation lives and breathes. we need to combine our knowledge and combine our imagination, and then we can really leverage these technologies. And it's the imagination issue of us thinking what we can do that is both a challenge and an opportunity. So thank you for your time. Cheers.